Okay, picture this. You're reading a sweeping, dramatic family saga, a massive tale of war, duty, and immense tragedy. Now, what if the author of that epic didn't just invent those characters out of thin air, but actually fathered the very bloodline fighting the war? What if he physically stepped right into the pages of his own book to warn the kings, console the widows, and guide the destiny of his own grandchildren? I mean, it sounds like some mind-bending piece of modern metafiction, right? But this is actually the ancient reality of one of the most revered figures in human history.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving deep into the life, the work, and the profound teachings of Ved Vyasa. He is the ultimate storyteller, a legendary sage, and really the towering architect of Indian philosophy. Whether you view him as an extraordinary historical figure or as a powerful literary symbol, understanding Vyasa is absolutely crucial to understanding the bedrock of ancient wisdom. So let's get right into it.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with number 1, the ultimate sage, then move to 2, birth of a dynasty, and 3, author and character. After that, we'll open up 4, his library of sacred texts, distill 5, timeless philosophical lessons, and finish up with 6, the man versus the myth.
Starting right off with Section 1, the ultimate sage.
The name Vyasa itself is totally fascinating. In Sanskrit, it literally means arranger, compiler, or editor. So it's actually less of a birth name and more of a grand job description. He was originally born as Krishna Dvaipayana. Krishna denoting his dark complexion, and Dvaipayana because according to tradition, he was miraculously born on an island in the Yamuna River. But he earned the title of Vyasa because he dedicated his entire existence to organizing, dividing, and transmitting the universe's sacred knowledge just so human beings could actually comprehend it.
Moving right along to Section 2, birth of a dynasty.
Vyasa's family tree is incredibly tangled. Honestly, it rivals any modern soap opera you could think of. First, Vyasa is born to Satyavati and the sage Parashara. Later on, his mother Satyavati ends up marrying the king of Hastinapura. Well, when her royal sons die without any heirs, the entire royal lineage is teetering on the brink of extinction. So, Satyavati calls upon her firstborn son, Vyasa. Following an ancient practice of authorized surrogacy known as niyoga, Vyasa steps in to literally save the lineage. He biologically fathers Dhritarashtra, who is born blind, Pandu, who is born pale, and Vidura. Those sons then go on to father the Kauravas and the Pandavas, the warring cousins at the very center of the epic.
And that brings us to Section 3, author and character, where things get wonderfully complex.
The Mahabharata is Vyasa's most famous traditional contribution. 100,000 verses. To put that staggering scale into perspective, if you sat down to read it, it's substantially longer than the Iliad and the Odyssey combined. It is just a monumental exploration of war, ethics, politics, and human psychology.
But here is where the narrative completely breaks the fourth wall. Vyasa doesn't just sit in a hermitage writing about these events after the fact. No, he acts as an active participant and a sage observer. He shows up in the royal court to warn the blind king Dhritarashtra about destructive political decisions. He visits his grandsons, the Pandavas, during their agonizing exile in the forest just to offer spiritual guidance. He's the ultimate insider, chronicling a devastating war between his very own biological grandchildren. There's this beautiful traditional myth about how this massive text was actually recorded. So Vyasa asked Lord Ganesha to be his scribe. Ganesha agreed, but on one extremely strict condition. Vyasa could not pause his dictation. Well, Vyasa countered with a strict rule of his own. Ganesha had to perfectly understand every single verse before writing it down. It was basically an ancient, brilliant hack. Whenever Vyasa needed a quick breather to compose the next section, he would craft an incredibly complex, naughty verse, which forced the brilliant Ganesha to pause and think. This legendary collaboration perfectly symbolizes the synthesis of ultimate knowledge, memory, intelligence, and rigorous discipline.
Let's dive into Section 4, Library of Sacred Texts.
Vyasa's title as the arranger comes from an absolutely incredible feat. Tradition holds that he took the single primordial Veda and cleanly divided it into 4 accessible collections for humanity. You have the Rig Veda for hymns, the Sama Veda for chants, the Yaju Veda for rituals, and the Atharva Veda for prayers and spells. This monumental act of categorization is exactly why he is most formally known as Ved Vyasa.
But his resume doesn't even stop there. Tradition also credits him with compiling the 18 Mahabharatas, which contain the vast mythologies and cosmologies of the Hindu tradition.
On top of that, he is attributed as the author of the Brahma Sutras. That's one of the absolute foundational texts of Vedanta philosophy, analyzing the nature of ultimate reality. Plus, he passed all this knowledge down through great disciples, most notably his own son, the deeply detached and realized sage Shukadeva.
Section 5. Timeless Philosophical Lessons.
Embedded right smack in the middle of the raging war of the Mahabharata is a dialogue called the Bhagavad Gita. It's an intense conversation between the warrior Arjuna and his charioteer Krishna. In just 700 verses, Vyasa delivers a highly concentrated masterclass on duty, action, and the human mind.
The Gita lays out 4 major paths for human development. You've got Karma Yoga for selfless action, Jnana Yoga for the intellectual pursuit of true knowledge, Bhakti Yoga for pure devotion, and Dhyana Yoga for the discipline of meditation. What Vyasa brilliantly argues here is that spiritual realization doesn't require you to just abandon all your worldly responsibilities. You can act in the world, you can lead, and you can work, as long as you do it with understanding, detachment, and devotion.
He also offers a perfectly balanced framework for a complete human experience through the 4 Purusharthas, or aims of life. Yes, you need Dharma, your moral and ethical duty, and ultimately moksha, which is spiritual liberation. But he argues you also need artha, material well-being, and kama, emotional and psychological fulfillment. It's not just about retreating to a cave somewhere, it's a completely holistic roadmap for living fully.
But if there's one overarching psychological takeaway from Vyasa, it's this phrase: Dharma is subtle. The characters in his stories are incredibly complex. They aren't purely good or purely evil. They face intense moral ambiguities, where literally every choice has a terrible cost, and duties constantly conflict. Vyasa warns us over and over about the destructive power of uncontrolled desire, anger, and the greed for power. He teaches us that doing the right thing isn't about looking at some rigid rule book. It requires deep wisdom, an understanding of context and consequences, and crucially, listening to wise counsel.
And that brings us to our final section, the man versus the myth.
We have to impartially look at the 2 distinct lenses through which Vyasa is viewed today. On one side, we have the profound traditional belief. This is a deep reverence for a single, extraordinary, immortal sage who single-handedly categorized the Vedas and composed these sweeping epics. On the other side, we have modern historical scholarship taking a more analytical view. This perspective suggests that massive texts like the Mahabharata evolved over many centuries through generations of oral transmission. So in this view, Vyasa might actually represent a brilliant dedicated lineage of editors and compilers rather than just one single man.
But honestly, regardless of which lens you look through, the outcome is exactly the same. The name Vyasa operates as a powerful, eternal symbol. He is the ultimate personification of the human desire to compile, preserve, and transmit wisdom across the ages. Without the arranger, this profound heritage of ethics, philosophy, and storytelling would have simply been lost to time. Which leaves us with this final thought to ponder. When you look at the devastating consequences of greed in our modern world, or when you struggle with the subtle, conflicting duties in your own daily life, Vyasa's teachings provide immediate, practical clarity. So if these profound lessons on human nature still resonate so deeply today, thousands of years later, does it really matter if he was a single immortal grandfather or a brilliant centuries-long tradition of scholars? The wisdom remains exactly the same. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to go explore these epic texts for yourself.